Hi, everyone. I'm Toni Land, founder and chief experience officer for Landing Exceptional Experiences, and welcome to ToniTime. So today we are going to dig into, I'm going to say, a frustrating topic for many, whether you're truly a nurse at the bedside or you are a nurse leader out there. And that topic is Bedside Shift Report. So I'm telling you, if you go out there and you Google Bedside Shift Report, there are so many comments around this topic. They're on Quora, they're on Reddit, they're on All Nurses. And so it's interesting to hear the team members' perspective and their frustrations around the push, what they feel like is the push for Bedside Shift Report and their response and why they push back on Bedside Shift Report. So let's just dig in right away to a couple of the Reddit posts that I came across that I thought would be most interesting for our conversation today. And then, of course, we'll dig into some bigger whys around that and some suggestions that you can take away and move forward. So this first post, the nurse says, Bedside Shift Report is the most loathsome upper management intervention since whiteboards. I mean, wow. They go on to say, I'm all about running through the necessary stuff outside the room. Give me abnormal vitals that need treatment, CNOs that were significant, cardiac arrhythmias, again, that were significant, and warnings about toxic family members. Then let's pop in the room, make sure the patient is breathing, the vent isn't alarming, tele looks good, and that all drips are running at the correct rate. Only the most urgent of patient needs are handled. Otherwise, I'll let your aide, I'll let your aide know. I'll be back after I see my other patients. And if the patient's asleep and I'm feeling extra spicy, I'll update the whiteboard then, but only with the date and my name. I'll let the aides and the medical teams write their own names and numbers up there. What needs to be said has to be said quickly, and then let's move on. You have to go home, and I've got to start prioritizing which patients get electrolyte replacements first. Everything else I need is in Epic. Okay. How about another Reddit comment? Interesting. This is going to be interesting to hear what you guys have to say about this. For context, I work in a NICU with private patient rooms, just like adult ICU rooms. We have always given report at the computer and then gone into the patient room to check lines and to say hi and bye to parents and answer any questions. This morning, one of the assistant nurses asked to audit my report. Yeah, sure, who cares? I'm giving a report on a kid with no parents at the bedside, at the desk, like I always do. The manager interrupts and asks, and why are we not doing report at the bedside? I respond, because there's no family. And she shoots back, well, it is policy to always do bedside report unless family explicitly requests not to do it. So then I have to bumble through report in a room with a sleeping preemie baby who had nothing to add and no questions about her care without a computer, all while being critiqued for not memorizing this kid's meds and orders. I mean, I generally like my job, but WTF. Edit. I do want to jump in and say we always do bedside checks after giving report outside the room. We check lines together. We verify E-tube placement. We do IV pump check, and just want to clarify that. So interesting response there from the manager. And we're going to talk about this, the why around the bedside report. So then even I looked at All Nurses, and one of the things they said was, I think that every organization pushes bedside report because they want to improve their press gaining scores and make patients feel included in their plan of care. However, as others have pointed out, the impracticality of giving and getting report on 5 to 7 patients, often from different nurses, in all the patient rooms, the complications are obvious, and the time constraints make it nearly impossible. Every report would take over an hour if that were to truly happen as management intends. I tried to get into the patient's room to report, and I've given report to a few nurses that feel like bedside shift report is the time to get their whole assessment done. I mean, they're pulling out their stethoscope, asking patients about pain levels, just no. In my view, it's a safety sweep to make sure the patient is alive and as well as they can be, and then move on. But giving full report at the bedside isn't in the best interest of anyone. Then we had someone who was in school chime in. I'm in school, and one of my classmates wrote for an assignment last week about the bedside report. It was recommended by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, or AHRQ. And when looking for a paper, I found one hospital, pediatrics, that includes the physical assessment into the report. They said it prevented people from avoiding rooms until they looked up the patient. Plus, getting the assessment done early means that if the shift gets busy, at least the assessment was done. Plus, if you look at lines and fluids, you can find infiltrates and incorrect rates, etc. But I hated it. I mean, who wants to wake up at 7 a.m. after getting crappy hospital sleep? Then you had one that said, well, dang, I think I'm the only one here who actually loves it. It took a while, but once I felt more confident doing it, it actually made things so much faster. It truly does help keep other nurses accountable. It keeps patients informed, and they tend to stay off the call bell because they know what I'm doing and how long it'll be until I'm back. You're going to give report and then round together anyway, so why not just get it out of the way all at once? I think it depends entirely upon how you explain what you're doing and take control of the room. You're setting expectations and building trust from the get-go. No? I mean, obviously, it doesn't work great with every single patient, but for most, in my experience. Med-surg 3 years, ER 6 years, PACU 3 years. It works, and I make all my preceptees do it too. So there you've got a convert there, someone who's really an advocate and a push for bedside shift report. And I thought, let me just reach out to a couple of my nurse leader friends who are currently CNOs out there and get their feedback. And I'm interested in hearing from some of you CNOs in the comments. One of my nurse leader friends said, yes, we mandate nurse bedside report. It ensures an effective handoff between nurses. We encourage them to go into the room and to include the patient. This gives the off-going nurse the opportunity to make sure that things are in order, and the oncoming nurse the opportunity to eyeball the patient, the lines, the fluids, etc., and to make sure they're in order for the introduction of the new nurse, as well as goodbye of the off-going nurse to the patient. And of course, if there's family in the room, it's a good opportunity for them to be able to ask questions. Another one of the nurse leaders said, although it's not a Joint Commission requirement, it's more around patient safety. I mean, I prefer that bedside report be done at the bedside as part of the purpose to include the patient in their care and allow them to ask questions or refute anything that is being discussed about them. It reinforces keeping the patient at the center of all we do. So although not that Joint Commission requirement, still around patient safety. And so it's interesting listening to a couple of my nurse leader friends as they talked about patient centricity and safety. I did not hear that, from the nursing post that I read earlier from All Nurses and from Reddit, where they felt like we're doing our safety checks. So why do we have to do that other part that's at the bedside, which I think our nurse leaders would say that's part of the patient centricity portion of the work. And so when I think about, what's like one of the biggest missing pieces of this puzzle is connecting to that why and being sure that your teams understand and embrace that why, because that's what drives us to do the work and to do certain things because we understand the why. So one of our whys is around the Joint Commission Sentinel event and National Patient Safety Goals. And so the Joint Commission requires all health providers to implement some type of standardized approach to handoff. They don't specifically say bedside shift report, but they do say a standardized approach to handoff communications that includes an opportunity to ask and respond to questions. And I will say, when they're talking about that right there, it's talking about the sendee and the receiver. So that nurse to nurse conversation, they recommend that it's done in a way that there's an opportunity to ask and respond to questions. And so some of the guidelines that they have in place: interactive communication, up-to-date and accurate information, limited interruptions, a process for verification, an opportunity to review any relevant historical data, and include the patient when appropriate. Now, as they talk about this standardization, they talk about a standardized process across various units and a standardized tool so that information is shared in a standard way. iPass is a tool out there, and I'll put some links below to help that you can reference as you start working with your teams on some of this. But iPass is one of the solutions out there, and then SBAR. Those are two of the most common tools out there that can really help your teams to standardize. And there's even research out there where you even look, yes, you've got the Joint Commission, you've got AHRQ, you've got the IHI, all have resources on handoff, that nurse handoff and communication. I looked at some research on moving bedside shift report to the bedside, and this was from 2018. And there was a hospital that really did some quality improvement, some process improvement work, and they were looking at what would happen if they moved bedside report to that bedside, and they saw patient falls decrease by 24%. They also saw nurse satisfaction improve in 4 of your 6 nursing survey questions. And so this was done through that implementation of bedside shift report. And again, I'll put these links down below. In Nursing Open from 2021, as they did some research around handoff and what that looks like, 5 themes were identified. And those themes were around time constraints and nurses' workflow that must be taken into consideration. A modified approach is necessary. Process and specific critical content should be individualized. Specific critical content should be discussed outside the patient's room, and specific critical content that should be discussed inside the patient's room. And their conclusion was, one way to minimize the interruptions, which we said earlier is one of those Joint Commission standards, is to conduct bedside report using a modified approach, where there's a portion of the handoff that occurs inside and outside the patient's room. And in the study identified that nurses preferred a location where specific critical topics could be discussed. Lastly, from some of the research was from the American Journal of Critical Care in 2022, and the results were 3 themes emerged. Handoff elements were defined by practice and culture. A clear, consistent, identified structure supports handoff, and personal preferences can disrupt handoff. Conclusions: that a standardized approach to handoff based on unit and organizational needs will be more successful than a broad mandate of content and organization. Individual preference is prevalent and strongly influences the information conveyed and the structure of handoff communication. So that's going back to using those standard tools so we can be sure that some standard information is shared across the board as that handoff takes place. So if I were moving forward, I would take these resources, these links that are below, share these with a nursing steering committee that can focus on this body of work. Maybe it's your professional practice committee if you're, magnet designated or on that journey, but get a group of nurses together. Now, I tell you what would be next level if you had a patient also a part of what this looks like. and what this feels like to patients and families, then that to me would be the ideal. But get them together along with all these resource materials. So put a little packet together to them, email it to them, print it to them, whatever works for you and your organization. And then you're starting to establish the why. Why some type of handoff, some type of shift report handoff in a standardized fashion is important. So why it's important, why it benefits the nurses, why it benefits the patient and the family. So have them establish some goals that they want to reach. Maybe it's a decrease in IV infiltrations. Maybe it's a decrease in falls. Maybe it's a decrease in calls to the unit from the family. Maybe it's decrease in calls to the unit from the patient. So have them identify some of the goals that they want to achieve. You can also include those things around human experience, patient experience, and team member or nurse satisfaction or experience. Those metrics can also be included. Then you want to measure and report, measure and report, measure, report, and revise as needed. So, it's interesting looking at it. There were a couple of things that kind of asked you to think about too. And these are some of the questions you pose to that group as they're determining what are the goals and what are even the non-negotiables around this body of work. So identify the logistics of bedside report. I mean, what is our report or our handoff going to look like for a hospital? What's it going to look like for specific units, knowing that might look different? Do you have semi-private rooms? There were lots of comments around semi-private room and what nurses felt like were the appropriateness of sharing some of this information when there are semi-private rooms. So what does that look like? Have this group discuss that. Looking at some of those still a standard procedure and way of handoff. What does that look like? Some hospitals implemented a bedside shift report where they do a 10-minute overview on all patients, where everybody's together, which I actually like, because then we all kind of have at least a high-level idea of what's going on our unit as we work as a team to take care of patients and families. And then they go to the individual rooms and do a bedside report and safety check. And so then look at your workflows. The unit's workflows are different if you're in critical care, if you're in the NICU, or if you're on a med-surg unit. Those all look different. So think about your workflow and what's going to be the most efficient process. What if you have a large population that don't speak English as a first language? How are you going to meet that need in a bedside report? So thinking through those things for your team members. So lots of resources available, lots of work still to be done around bedside shift report. It's not new. It's been around a long time. And I would say we have an opportunity to step back and allow our nurses to co-design with us. And like I said, ideal and highest level that families are included in that also. And let's design what that looks like. Do some rapid cycle testing and step back and revise until you find what works for your teams, your families, your hospital, your organization in order to achieve those goals. So I know that this is a topic that most people are working on. So looking forward to comments below. And then I'm going to ask that you like and subscribe to this channel. This is ToniTime, where solutions are just a discussion away.